Okay, so now we can actually get into kind of the nitty-gritty of working through a problem that has to do with cost relevancy. So remember, it has to be a future cost and it has to be something that differs across alternatives. And it can't be a sunk cost. So those are things that have to happen. So one of those areas is a make or buy decision. So companies have to decide whether it's more profitable or more beneficial for them. I shouldn't say profitable because it's usually a cost reduction strategy, to make something in-house or to buy it from somewhere else. So manufacturing something and maybe using it as part of my product versus having someone else buy it. So for a computer, this would be things like the CPU, like the central processing unit. Is it more beneficial for the company that's making the computers, to have someone else build the CPU and install it into their computers, or is it more beneficial for them to manufacture it themselves? Airplane manufacturers, is it more beneficial for them to manufacture the parts that go into that airplane themselves, or buy it from someone else? So when we look at something like this, we have to only look at relevant costs. So make or buy, we're talking about internal versus external production. So for example, we have Fresh Foods as a restaurant chain, that wants to determine if it would be cheaper to produce 5,000 units of its main food ingredient for use in its restaurants, or to purchase them from an outside source. So cost information includes the following. So we have the total cost is $25,000, which makes the unit cost 5, and all that would be is 25,000 divided by 5 here. The direct labor cost is $15,000, which is $3 per unit. The variable manufacturing overhead is $7,500, which is $1.50 per unit. Variable marketing overhead is $10,000 or $2 per unit. The fixed plant overhead is $30,000, which is $6 per unit. And so my totals, I've got a total of $87,500 worth of cost and a total unit cost of $17.50. So I can set this up. Fixed overhead, it says here, will continue whether the ingredients are purchased or are produced internally or externally. No additional cost of purchasing would be incurred beyond the purchase price. So what are the alternatives for Fresh Foods? Well, the two alternatives are make or buy. So I'll start a table here so we can make the product or we can buy the product. And what are my product costs involved if I choose to do one versus the other? So I would have direct materials cost. I would have direct labor. I would have variable manufacturing overhead. I would have variable marketing overhead. And I wouldn't have fixed costs. I'm not even going to put fixed costs on this list. And the reason is because it is an irrelevant cost. And it's an irrelevant cost because it does not differ across alternatives, because this specifically says, that we just read a second ago, that fixed overhead will continue whether it's produced internally or externally. So that means that it's not a cost I'm going to take into account. But as far as if I buy it, I do have a cost of purchasing. So I have to purchasing the product would give me my cost. So if we look at this, just based on the numbers that we can see on the surface without doing any additional work, we see that they can buy the outside product for $12. The unit cost is $17.50. So just on the surface, it looks like it is going to be cheaper for us to buy the product externally. We'll see if that's actually the case or not once we go through the numbers. So to make the product, I'm going to use the $25,000 worth of direct materials, the $15,000 worth of direct labor, the $7,500 worth of variable manufacturing overhead, and the variable marketing overhead, but I'm not going to use the fixed cost. If I buy it, I would have no direct materials, no direct labor, no variable marketing overhead. If I make it, I wouldn't have any cost in purchasing the product. But if I buy it, I would, and the cost would be 5,000 units times 12. So equals 5,000 units times $12 per unit. So my total cost here is $57,500 to make it. And my total cost here is $60,000 to buy it. You can also do a totals column here, or totals, I should call differential cost. And sum that up. So what I have found here now is that it is cheaper for me to purchase, sorry, it's cheaper for me to make the product than it is for me to buy it. Whereas on the surface, if I didn't dive deeper into this, I would have thought at $17.50 per unit versus $12 per unit that it would have been cheaper for me to buy the product. But what the big thing that happened here is that we got rid of an irrelevant cost, being this fixed cost, right? So these were all relevant costs. But if I just added up the relevant unit cost, by the way, I would get $11.50, which is cheaper than this 12, which is where that cost savings comes from. But I only figured that out by looking into it further and making sure that I removed irrelevant costs and only included relevant costs.